Sliding POV is a technique all writers should be familiar with. It treats POV much like a director does camera angles, with differing shots, and each of these shots, when used tactfully, keeps the audience's attention while focusing them on what the writer wants them to focus on. The basics of it involve subtly shifting POV throughout a scene or story, based on what you wish to highlight and the moment demands. However, this isn't a technique that can be just understood without some additional knowledge first. This brings us to psychic distance, aka narrative distance. Narrative distance describes the perceived space between a novel's narrator, the reader, and the story's events. John Gardner broke it down to 5 different levels. I'm going to simplify these 5 to 2 variants: guides and filters. A guide narrator is an external perspective, such as an omniscient narrator or a first-person retrospective narrator. They are aware of the reader's existence and that they are telling a story to them. The guide narrator takes on the role of guiding the reader through the story, directing their attention to specific elements, and presenting the story in a way that aligns with their own perspective or agenda. In this way, the guide narrator serves as a storyteller who shapes the reader's experience of the narrative. This is where people often start things because it's what we naturally experience and do. You're going to see beginners and unseasoned writers do this a lot. The drawback to it is the fact that it's not immersive, since the reader is having information relayed as opposed to experiencing the journey with the characters. Filter narrators, meanwhile, aren't external to the story. This technique is characterized by close third-person and non-retrospective first-person perspectives. Unlike guide narrators, filter narrators aren't aware of the reader's existence, nor are they intentionally telling a story. Instead, they live their lives within the story, filtering all information through their own experiences and biases in a non-self-conscious way. Despite potentially lying to themselves and other characters in the story, filter narrators cannot deceive the reader. Now, having established this, we can understand the differing levels much faster. I don't care for the number stuff Gardner used since I feel it's easy to confuse or get backwards. Here's how I made sense of it. There's objective observer, outside in, inside out, and immersive. Objective observer and outside in are guide narration, while inside out and immersive are filter narration. Objective observers are 100% outside of the story. So, for instance, omniscient second-person narrators and epistolary POVs are great for this. Omniscience should be obvious, given what I already said about guide narrators. Second person falls into this because second person create a sense of detachment, as the reader isn't identifying with a specific character, but in insert they're piloting. Epistolary, meanwhile, is where the story is structured with letters, diary entries, and other personal documents. The reader is presented with whatever is shared, but at a remote level, like reading a historical document. This approach is great at the beginning of things, when anchoring the reader into the story. I should note though, when using a more objective POV before transitioning into something closer, it's best to keep this as brief as possible. Modern audiences aren't often interested in some kind of exposition dump straight out the gate. Still, they're more willing to be patient and accepting of this to get them settled into the story world. It's a balancing act, as is most things in art. Outside in focuses more on the character, but it's still an outsider reporting and summarizing the character's experience. The narrator is just more invisible because there isn't a clear being separate from the story. Still, the verbal camera sees stuff the POV character couldn't. For example, using my own character, Cassidy's face turned red. A calculating smirk spread across Cassidy's lips. Cassidy was hungry and thought that roasted venison she smelled would taste great. If I wish to filter the experience to what the character is experiencing, I should use an inside-out perspective. Cassidy's face warmed. Cassidy shot him a smirk, or even just, Cassidy smirked. Instead of reporting, I'm portraying the actual experience. We're inside Cassidy, participating in the action, rather than outside, watching her act. This tends to work well with techniques used for deep POV. There's a lot more I could say here on how, especially with showing and telling, but that's a conversation for another time. Still, to show you how it can transform something, let's use that last example I gave, with Cassidy hungry. Here's what happens when I try to switch from an outside-in perspective to an inside-out one. the woodsy fragrance of thyme, rosemary, and garlic infused with the savory aroma of the roasted venison and wafted into Cassidy's nostrils. Her stomach growled and her mouth watered. It's more demanding, but it's also more rewarding for the reader. When I wish to go even deeper into immersive, I focus on the interior monologue. I highly recommend focusing your writing here, since the interior world, thoughts, emotion, visceral responses, and feelings, are what truly connect us to a character, which connects us to the story, and world, and everything else. The interior is literature's edge over visual mediums. Anyway, when doing this, utilize direct internal dialogue, indirect internal dialogue, and stream of consciousness. Just keep in mind that a thought stimulus needs to be on the page and come first. So, going back to the venison example, the woodsy fragrance, blah blah blah. Her stomach growled and her mouth watered. When would it be ready? If you want an easy formula for internalization, here's the proper order: visceral response, emotion, thought, and feeling. It also can help to know scene sequel structure, as sequel part goes far more into the internal world, but that's a video I recommend watching after this one. Anyway, you can go even further, into stream of consciousness. This is when we portray a character's thought process as if it's occurring in real time, without any filter or organization. It often includes fragmented sentences, free association, and a lack of punctuation. Everything goes unmediated by the narrator. The problem with this style is that too much of it can become suffocating and difficult to read. There's a reason why the book Ulysses doesn't often get finished. I personally only enjoy using this style for contemplative scenes, when I wish to emphasize a character working through a problem, and even then, I'm careful. Anyway, when using sliding POV, you vary between these based on the scene and what's demanded. I typically stay in the filter territory with inside-out perspective and immersion, but there are rare moments where a guide can help, such as with openings or sometimes with endings. In fact, I've used this approach for the second novel in my Grandmaster of Death series, The Ties That Blind. At any rate, I use differing POV angles to guide the reader through what I wish for them to focus on, and, more importantly, I shift between each type gradually and unobtrusively. You can't go from omniscient to immersive stuff without shifting gears through those in between. It's far too jarring. Also, just for the record, you should overall stay consistent with a POV. For instance, if you pick a guide narrator, it's best to remain as a guide narrator for much of the story. The same goes for filter narrators. Still, these are principles, not absolutes. I don't wish to say it's impossible to do well, never say never, but I will say I wouldn't recommend it. Or at least the me who wrote this video wouldn't. Feel free to use or not use this information as you please. If you do wish to use it and you're struggling to apply this concept, feel free to ask for help in the comments. I'll do my best. And if this video has helped you at all, I'd appreciate it if you could press the like button and or share how it has helped you in the comments. Support like that is more encouraging than anything else for me at this stage in my journey with YouTube.